Betsy and Thomas. It's Tyler and Douglas Gabriel, and we have got two articles that were so intense that we felt that the best way to share them with you is if we took them and discussed them. So I sent you a live stream notice a few hours ago, and I put the articles there. Excuse me, let me look away from the screen and tell you the names of those articles. And they come from the conservative treehouse. We love Sundance. He does such a remarkable job in picking the details out in the swamp. The first article is ICIG whistleblower form recently modified to permit complaint heard from others form. And we're going to be talking about this form right here. And then another one is a whistleblower complaint is the Schiff dossier. I love it how Devin Nunes is calling this the Schiff dossier. It's really quite a play on where we've come the long way of the Mueller dossier and then the Zuckerberg dossier. We've had many. Okay, Thomas, this was profound because it's showing us that there is a very small group in Washington, D.C. that are working actively to overthrow our government and the President of the United States.
That's right. It's sad, and when you hear it said out loud, it's almost unbelievable to think it's happening in America. But we have pointed out that the treasonous crimes started during the election, and they continued. Comey himself committed at least 28. We now know we had to add 3 new crimes that he committed by placing FBI spies on the National Security Council. Well, this sounds the same. This is a CIA spy, supposed whistleblower, supposedly connected to the White House with all this Ukrainian nonsense, which, first off, nothing you've heard probably is true unless you've gone to the original documents, and then we're going to discuss that in a minute. But yes, it underscores the reality that the coup is still active. We've said that. We always say that. And the reality is it hasn't stopped. And this was a little surprising. It's not surprising who's involved with this new Ukrainian dossier, this complete fabrication and setup. But what we do know is now one of the characters that we have not investigated. His name is Michael Atkinson, the Inspector General for the intelligence community. We didn't know about this guy. And we sure didn't know that he was in the Department of Justice National Security Division. At the same time, John Carlin was there, and then his 2 replacements. Remember, he jumped ship early. And we said from the beginning, the reason John Carlin jumped ship was because he was fully, completely intertwined, not only with the Russian dossier, but with all the FISA requests. Now we find that this Inspector General came out of the same office, and he was one of the chief counsels. So in other words, let me frame this for you appropriately. This Michael Atkinson, this new, this Inspector General, who was appointed by Trump, by the way, Inspector General for the intelligence community, is allowing this whistleblower to come forward and making a big deal out of it, though, in fact, he's just like Mueller saying, oh, nothing really happened, no collusion, no corruption, but I still have to make a big public deal out of this so that it can be turned into impeachment. So basically, this guy is as guilty as Robert Mueller is. He's more guilty because I'm not sure Robert Mueller knew as much as Michael Atkinson did when he worked in the Department of Justice National Security Division, because that's where the whole nonsense started. Let's go back and recap for those who remember. There's a person, Andrew, what's his name? He was on the Mueller special counsel, Andrew Weissman. He was there. And then another member who was on Mueller's counsel, her name is Zainab Ahmad.
Yes, Zainab Ahmad.
She's also fully complicit when Bruce Orr brought Christopher Steele's complete poppycock, but then it was asked for by John McCain. It was asked for by Comey. So let's not forget that. Christopher Steele didn't just show up with his dossier in January of 2016 because Trump was barely getting his feet wet. But they knew they had to have a Russian cover-up story. And so for Hillary to cover up for Uranium One, to cover up for the reset button, to cover up for her Chinese communism with Walmart and all of this other stuff. So We told you all about, I think in an audio just yesterday, the Ukrainians, and we reminded you that we had already told you all of these things in intelligence reports and in our Betsy and Thomas um, routine here. And what we've noticed now is that there was a person in that office we didn't know anything about. And then he got promoted to being the inspector general of the entire intelligence community. Oh, I wonder why they put his name in. Because he was 100% guilty, as guilty as anybody with the Russian dossier. Maybe more guilty because just like John Carlin, he's a lawyer. He knew exactly what was going on. And he didn't jump ship like John. He just kept his job and moved up into a different position and got a promotion. And as we know, any inspector general is probably crooked, just exactly like Michael Horowitz is crooked. We've told you his history. We've given you an entire intelligence report. We might have to go after Atkinson, but it doesn't even need to take place because why? It's all lies. And it is literally the Russian dossier 2.0, but it's constructed by complete nonsense. And we need to look at some of the players here. Some of the players involved in this are Dmitry Alperovich and CrowdStrike. And his dad, Michael Alperovich, is a person who has produced the crypto keys for most of the Department of Defense, the DIA, and most corporations in America. Any big corporation probably uses a Russian spy's crypto keys. That's the reason they can get in anytime they want. They don't have to leave footprints like Dmitry Alperovich keeps leaving these fake, false GRU footprints, which anybody can buy online. It's utterly ridiculous. He didn't even go to the 2.0 version of it. So when he got caught, and I want to point this out, yes, Trump said CrowdStrike, and then he said the server, and then he said, I understand you have some people in your country. And then later, he kept making partial phrases, right? Because he knew that if he could finish that sentence, he might be going into an area that's a gray area. And he knew that always, just like he said in his tweets, he knows everybody's listening because he knows the entire intelligence community is fake. He doesn't take his information from there. But it was hugely disappointing to see Joseph McGuire come out and try to play the party line, in other words, the uniparty line. And it was really sad because up until this time, I believed, and I know because I've seen evidence, that he was helping Trump. Now I don't know that he's helping Trump because anybody who would give credence to this. Now, what's critical in this article by Sundance, because Betsy's absolutely right, these two articles are critical, things we didn't even know about, which is really shocking to me because I thought that we had investigated very clearly everyone who was in that office and who had touched the original Christopher Steele Russian dossier and in its first installments. And we know that this happened in January, February, and March of 2016 because we have the evidence of Bruce and Nellie Orr in their testimony, as well as others in the State Department and others in the Department of Justice who have said this is true. Now, they haven't gone after some of the principal players like the British who are involved in this. So there are others we could mention who we have, but the point is that Ukraine was being played by Victoria Nuland. Now, why was Ukraine being played? And if you look into this article of both the articles of Sundance's, you'll find that they were directly working out of the Department of Justice National Security Division because then they can go outside of our country in their actions. And they went to Ukraine and they were basically strong-arming Ukraine with the help of Alexandra Chalupa and her cousin and her sister and others in Ukraine who are actually Russians who are trying to create and dig up dirt, and some are even insinuating held the 33,000 missing emails in some form or another in Ukraine. Wouldn't surprise me because the three oligarchs in Ukraine that are basically Nazis, they're the Party of the Regions, which is the party that supported the Nazis, who have given Joe Biden the highest honor they have in the country and given Hunter Biden a position on the most lucrative petroleum board in Ukraine, which became even wealthier once Obama put sanctions. How come we're not talking about that? The sanctions put on Russia so that Russia couldn't take their pipeline through Ukraine is the big issue here. Well, didn't that just make Hunter Biden even more filthy rich? Because as soon as that pipeline had sanctions on it, then Ukraine was making a fortune out of their own two giant fields that they have.
Okay. What I want to talk about what's going on in DC. I want to talk about this group of people. They are senior executive service. Nobody's talking about senior executive service. Sundance calls it the lawfare group. I guess that's if you're an attorney and you're going in and out and you're in on this whole overthrow of Trump. But it's very disturbing because it looks like Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats have changed the rules in which they're allowed to do when they have the majority in Congress. And they are working overtime to find a path towards impeachment. And this was a very concerning article to me about that. I want to talk about those details, Thomas.
Yes, Sundance pointed these things out early on, and I noticed them also, and I went and looked at the records that were being referenced there. And yes, they changed some rules, and you'd think that some of these rules are like, whoa, 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 how could this affect anything? Oh, if you're a parliamentarian like I am, you know that one single word in changing those rules controls everything. So right now, they can now do depositions without the opposition party there. What does that mean? It means the 4, 5, 6 people that they've already subpoenaed are going to be questioned only by the Democrats in a secret meeting in a deposition where they will be or won't be sworn to the truth. They probably won't be.
No, they go and they have the secret meetings. The Republicans aren't there. And then they take out their sound bites and they throw it out to the fake news group who starts spinning this out of control, where the stupid people in America still listen to CNN and Fox News, and then they believe all this garbage, and then their story gets to build and build and build. Before you know it, they're on the track for impeachment. That's what I saw in this article.
Well, we said from the beginning that Pelosi was doing all kinds of illegal things, and this is illegal. The rules she changed, it's actually not illegal, but it's unconstitutional, because it stops the checks and balance system. In other words, the Republicans are not going to be part of gathering the evidence for an impeachment hearing that they will then be part of, and their president, a Republican, is the one who is the target. Hello? Then that means any president could be that is the opposite party of the House of Representatives can be impeached. And they can be impeached because they hold the heads of the 3 principal committees that must make the recommendation. And when the vote goes to the floor, well, there's 38 Democrats who may or may not vote. It doesn't matter. They barely need those votes. They have plenty of votes to have impeachment. So will it go to the floor and be impeached? Yes. So what? Bill Clinton was impeached. Nothing happened. He was having sex in the Oval Office in the Rose Garden, extramarital sex, while he held up world leaders in the other office while he finished having sex with Monica Lewinsky. He lied about it, and he split hairs about it, and in the end, he was impeached. But what happened? Nothing. They took away his law license for a few years and gave him a fine, and he went right back to being the same person, continuing to have a lack of discretion in those exact same areas, which we now know is proof by all the people who said that they have essentially been raped by Bill Clinton even after that time. So does impeachment mean anything? No. Is he going to be impeached? No.
But it will mean something in today's political environment, because these people have to have Trump removed. The whole global takeover of the world we see it unraveling right now, and they have to get rid of him.
Yes, here's the problem. I don't have a word for those Hollywood people who are paying tens of millions of dollars to work with Penn-Quarter Group to continue an opposition research against Trump with the mainstream media, like Cher and like all the rest of them. But essentially, they're going to even lose them. Now, of course, they are all on the line because their guild tells them they have to come out against Trump or they're not going to get another contract. That's already been said by the people who aren't coming out, right? So we know that is all just paid political announcements, but some of them have put their money in on this. So they're going to be really upset, and so are all the Democrats. The demon rats, who are the true left, the true fascists, are going to be very, very mad at the Democrats because they're going to think that Trump's going to be impeached and that he's going to be kicked out of office. They don't know that's two different things. They don't know that the Senate has to vote on it. They don't know that John Roberts has to sit as a judge and hear the evidence. There's no evidence. There's no evidence in the House. They have no evidence. Their feelings got hurt. That's it. That's the only thing that they can put on the list. Their feelings got hurt, because it's going to go the opposite direction. When they actually start to investigate this, it's going to be the exact opposite of what the Democrats think they're trying to do, just like it backfired on Nadler and Adam Schiff just recently. It's backfiring on Adam Schiff because now they're demanding that he simply resign, or that he have an ethics investigation, because he came forward and lied. He just the grossest lies. And by the way, the whistleblower complaint is filled with lies also. And those aren't being addressed because we don't have that whistleblower complaint. We're not going to get that. And we're not going to hear the whistleblower because it's going to be in a deposition, possibly, where the Republicans aren't there and it's in secret. We're not going to hear the deposition of the man that the whistleblower report says was the Department of State representative in that meeting, because that person has now come out and denied that they were in that meeting. We're not going to hear what Pompeo says, which is going to exonerate Trump because that's exculpatory. We're not going to hear what Atkinson says about the IG intelligence community investigation.
So what basically they want to take a secret vote to impeach the president and then make something of it.
Well,
that sounds a lot. Excuse me. That sounds a lot like Mitt Romney.
Yes, the vote will be open, but it won't matter. They have the majority in all three of those committees. They have the majority in the House. They're going to get that. The only thing is that there are 38 Democrats who haven't said that they are really for impeachment, because 16 of them are in places where Trump swept that area. So if these Democrats say that they're for impeachment, they're not going to be reelected, which is good. We need those House seats back. And when the House is then Republican, this nonsense will stop. But we warned everyone this would happen. And as soon as Pelosi was elected, she changed all the rules. And no one could argue with these rules, because these are, just as Michael McKibben always says, these are administrative rules. These are regulations. These are, judges aren't making these decisions. They don't have to be constitutional. They don't have to be ethical. They don't have to be anything. So they changed the rules. And so that's what Nunes and Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows are all complaining about. They can't do a darn thing. They have to just stand back and watch. So what's going to happen? It's just like the Green New Deal. Oh, yes, go ahead and pass it. Do you think the Senate's going to pass it? How stupid do you think the Senate is? The Green New Deal was political nonsense.
Okay,
impeachment.
Thomas, let's go over here to the chat. Folks have got some good questions. If you'd like to ask a question about this topic, please feel free to do that, folks. And I'm sorry that I'm not looking at you. Again, when you're working these live streams, you've got to look over and look at the chats. Helen Davey dropped in, gives us our greetings. But
whoa!
Yes, Helen,
we love you.
We're from New Zealand, and we have listeners all over the world. It's so exciting to bring everybody together and here in this community. Now, Raisin Toast is always asking some good questions. And so here, this he, she, not sure which pronoun to use. Why doesn't President Sheriff Trump arrest Schiff, Pelosi, Nadler immediately? What about a citizen arrest of these folks?
We can't. He can't, we can't. But we could only do it on charges that we would find to be civil offenses. He can't do it because it's legal to lie in the Congress.
Yeah, it is legal for them to lie. So all folks, it is true what they say. It's a dog and pony show. We're just being entertained by what's going on. And I really liked hearing Devin Nunes explain in a short video the other day that we are in an information war. Now, of course, our audience has understood this for a long time. We were calling this the Great Information War for a while, until our research showed us that it really is an information war, and it started at the turn of the century, and it's all about propaganda and how propaganda, fake news, and spying all started in one evil hub. And you might want to say a few words about that.
Well, that's true, and I don't want to dismiss what Mr. and Mrs. Toast said in the question. And so I handled that rather glibly. Unfortunately, there isn't much that can be done. See, the Congress is a political game. And look at the crimes of Dianne Feinstein in the Senate Intelligence Committee. For instance, let's take James Wolfe, the head of security for the Senate Intelligence Committee. Finds out that he's been leaking the biggest leaks in U.S. history to his girlfriend, Alvy Watkins, for years and years and years. We're still waiting on the FISA unredacted report. Alvy had that years ago. How come she isn't being arrested for treason? She has a top secret, the most top secret judicial document that there possibly is, that is exculpatory evidence proving that the president was not guilty of the crimes of collusion or any of that, or certainly the new stuff with Ukraine. So why isn't Alvy Watkins being put in jail? Because when you're in Washington, D.C. and you're part of a certain group, that would be the elites. That would be the rich on both sides, Republican and Democrat, the elites on both sides, the uniparty, the globalists, those who are being paid by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, those who are being paid by Bill Browder and Leonid Blavatkin and Oleg Deripaska. There's so much crime going on in Washington, D.C. They go to D.C. for crime. And when they don't, they stand out like a Jim Jordan or a Mark Meadows or a Devin Nunes. Devin Nunes, I'm sorry, but in the end, 2024, let's just realize it's going to be Devin Nunes because he's one of the only honest people left in Washington, D.C. And he'll be one of the only ones left standing.
Oh, well, I was hoping Michael McKibben would run for president. I think that'd be a great choice because he knows so much about the swamp with all of his research. Now,
we're putting him in charge of the crypto keys, Betsy.
Oh, okay. All right. Jack Pratt, he wants to know, is Barr SES? And let's talk about Bill Barr. I mean, what's he doing? Is he just playing the bagpipes up there, keeping us entertained, or is he moving forward? Are we going to see some indictments from his office, or is he a swamp creature?
He is a swamp creature. But we have to remember that the swamp creatures right now are testing which way the wind blows. Those who are staying with the demon rats, the far left believers in the White House criminal globalists, they're not going to win. They're going to lose. And Bill Barr is SES. He always goes with whoever appoints him. That's the way it is. So we bet he's going to go with the person who appointed him, Trump. And yeah, he's going to pull out his bagpipes and it's going to sound horrible and he's going to try to entertain us. But at the same time, he knows exactly what to say to entertain us who are Trump MAGA supporters, right? He says the right things. Now, is he going to do the right thing? Oh, we're going to have to see how that goes. Here's what I said from the beginning, and this is only guessing. If John Durham doesn't hire dozens of people, nothing's going to happen. So, folks, just keep your eye on that. Keep your eye on all IG reports. They're all lies, and they tell you where the crimes were actually committed and who committed them. Okay? Peter Strzok was allowed to basically go through his 55,000 emails and remove all of them that had to do with his personal sexual relationship with Lisa Page, which Betsy says never happened, which I now agree with.
I think that they were planning Trump's assassination. That's what I believe. And until proven otherwise, these two creeps, that's what they were doing. I see no sign in any of the texts that have been released that there was anything of a sexual relationship between those two. And as a woman, excuse me, I'm talking. As a woman, I will tell you, Peter Strzok, really? No, I think Lisa could do much better than that demon face.
Yeah, so we know that the IG is crooked. And we know by the IG report exactly who committed the crimes. The people who were the most guilty, he said, did all these horrible things, kind of like giving immunity to Comey. Why didn't Michael Horowitz put Comey in jail for all of his 28 crimes of treason, not to mention his 6 times that he perjured himself, not to mention the lies he told the president, not to mention the new things that the evidence has come out with the New York Times and his friend Daniel. Why doesn't Comey go to jail? He's being protected by the IG, Robert Mueller, and now we know Michael Atkinson, the IG for the intelligence community.
Again, they are all senior executive service, which is the stay-behind army that Obama has in place to make sure these bureaucrats do his will and not the will of the people and President Trump.
So we don't know what Bill Barr is going to do, but I do know one thing. We know what Trump is doing, and he is fooling all of them. He lets them attack him. Let's take this Ukraine thing, right? Okay, he knew immediately, because it came out in the press immediately, that he had said bad things to a foreign leader. Isn't that dangerous?
That's your phone?
I don't have a phone that rings like that. That must be my wife Tyla's phone. You know, she's a busy person and all that. So let's see if I can turn it off.
Hey, look, Thomas, while you're taking a breath, and who knows why my phone was with you. Somebody wants to know if we're married. Yes, we are. And let's talk about Joseph McGuire. He's the acting ODNI. And oh, that's probably somebody who wants to join us in the live stream.
I don't doubt that.
Oh, don't just let it be. Yes, we're married.
So live streaming is so much fun because you can watch me scratch my head and dig in my ear or whatever. But now,
on point. I want to talk about Joseph McGuire.
Let's not move on to Joe yet. Let's move back a bit. Let's move back to Bill Barr. Is anything going to happen with Bill Barr? Remember when they said there were untold amounts of sealed indictments, and don't worry, Jeff Sessions is going to take care of it all? No, all lies. Why? That isn't the way it happens in Washington, D.C. Now, it is true that Trump has struck like lightning. That's true. And so people hope that things will happen. But Eric Holder hasn't gone to jail for Fast and Furious, and people are still being murdered on our southern border with the weapons, the military-grade weapons he gave to them. And he's out there gerrymandering districts because he's why? A Washington, D.C. elite Chicago mobist who came to D.C. and got his piece of the pie. So is anybody going to go to jail? Well, this is really, really some bad stuff going on. But remember, who goes to jail? I love when Sundance creates these giant pictures of all the people involved who are all, and he has their names under and who they work for, but he didn't have Michael Atkinson ever on that list that I remember. Maybe, I apologize if you did, because he's a good researcher. He, she, them, or whoever it is. We like reading them because they have somehow inside information, like they'll get those forums. Let's look at the forum. We know that good old Joe McGuire, and we know absolutely that Michael Atkinson are part of the coup cabal faking as an impeachment. How do we know that? Because when this call first happened, it went out to the news that, oh, Trump, because all of his calls always go out to the news, don't they? Especially if they think they can find anything controversial, twist it all up, lie. And they believe that if they can be the first to get ahead of the spin, then people believe the first and the last. They don't care about the details in between. They don't care that he's exonerated, exculpatory evidence comes forward. That doesn't matter. It's not even going to happen. The news never has to do that. They just care about the first and the last. So they come out and they said, what happened? Oh, Trump said all these horrible things to the head of Ukraine. Well, that's the reason that they use for justification for members of the House sending letters threatening Ukrainian officials that if they didn't keep studying, basically creating opposition research against Trump, even while he's in office, which is treasonous, seditious, and only traitors do that, and we need to put all of them up on the gallows because that's being a traitor, okay? You don't work with our enemy. Believe it or not, Ukraine is our enemy, though we gave them $4.7 million from the State Department and U.S. aid through Victoria Nuland admitting it. She admitted it repeatedly. That we knew that Ukraine was corrupt. They were friggin' Nazis. But it's a satellite country of the USSR, of Russia, really, now. And so what happened? The oligarchs are being bought out by politicians here in America and by big bankers in America. And that's what we saw Hunter Biden do in Ukraine and then go right on over to China. And don't forget his good friend, Christopher Hines, who was right there with him and just as guilty. And so when we talk about Bill Barr, we don't know yet. We don't know yet. We don't know how deep the corruption goes. I didn't know the names of any three of those FBI spies placed on the National Security Council because their names don't appear anyplace. They were spies. The fact that they were even there working for the FBI should put Comey in jail. The fact that there was a CIA leak or a CIA leaker inside the Situation Room with the four people in there, Trump was one of the four, One of the other ones I happen to know, and the other two, one of them had to be, because the one that I know came out and said, I wasn't hearing the conversation. Uh, I did not hear the conversation. I did not hear President Zelensky's end of it. Mm-hmm. So we know that it comes down to two people. So we know who you are. Okay. We know the two people. Trump knows who you are. So he's going to put you in jail. So as soon as you try to impeach him with information about Ukraine, you go to jail, Atkinson goes to jail, and then the whole dominoes start to fall. So thank you for setting up Ukraine and changing the form, because the form had to be changed after the Zelensky conversation took place. The form for a whistleblower had to be changed so that it could be hearsay. So yes, it was all hearsay because the form was changed so that they, as Sundance pointed out, or I think Newman pointed out.
Thomas, I put the form right up there so people can see. You see, they've added a new checkbox that I've heard it from others. And this was new. It was added in August 2019. And this is what we mean by lawfare. They use words, they use the law to war against patriots and America. I mean, if we were that concerned of this, then how come we're not concerned of this?
Exactly. That's where it should have gone. That's where the investigation should have gone.
Years about Seth Rich. And we want to know what Donna Brazile knows. And why is she at Fox? And why is Paul Ryan on the board of directors at Fox? And why don't any of the Fox reporters and talking heads talk about the overthrow attempt of the Privy Council? We're talking about the Privy Council, Richard Dearlove, Jeffrey Patty, that to take over America and the presidency. You don't hear this on mainstream media, and they are never going to talk about it because they're the mouthpiece for the globalists.
I'm so glad you brought up the Brits, because I was so shocked to hear what has been added by the president of Ukraine. And here's what's been added. Mm-hmm. When Biden was caught and recorded, and now it's in a beautiful commercial for Trump. It's a campaign commercial where you have Biden sitting at the Council for Foreign Relations. I doubt if he even knows how to spell those words, but that's who told him what to do while he was in office, the Council of Foreign Relations. So he was there bragging to them that he told the president of Ukraine that if he didn't fire the man going after his son for his illegal activities in Ukraine, he was going to cancel $1 billion from U.S. aid. Again, USAID, that would be the seventh floor. That's Hillary Clinton. That's John Kerry. Hello, that's Christopher Hines. In 6 hours when I leave, you ain't getting the money. Well, guess what? They didn't listen to him because he's stupid Biden. He's reversed every position he's ever had. He's an imbecile. He plagiarized beginning in high school. And in all levels, he has been caught plagiarizing because he can't write, he cannot think. And here, this proves it. On film, he says emoluments. He might as well have screamed, I got my son millions of dollars because I threatened the Ukraine.
It's just like
what did the Ukrainians said? Then the British called them. The British allies, they refer to them. The British allies called and asked them to go ahead and do what Biden said. In other words, the Queen had to nod yes. The British Council, Jeffrey Patty and Mark Malloch Brown, probably that's who he called. Undoubtedly, Biden simply picked up the phone, hit speed dial, talked to Lord Mark Malloch Brown, the person who owns and created Optech, who owns the elections throughout the world, who owns his own set of election machines in America, who's on the Privy Council, who is proud to say that he has manipulated over 120 elections worldwide, and that in one election he only wrote one sentence and made the leader fall back to getting hardly any votes. That's who he called. And that's who probably called, I say probably, that's who probably called the Ukrainians. And who did Joe Biden call? While the Brits were calling the president of Ukraine, he was calling his three Nazi party of the region's friends who put their highest honor around his neck, and then he did a Heil Hitler right afterwards. Right before his son got those contracts, by the way. And then he comes and he threatens them. Well, guess what? That is the biggest crime anybody could ever do. That's unbelievably open manipulation using U.S. tax dollars to get your son a high position, to get him not prosecuted for his real crimes. Remember, he's a cokehead. Remember, he had a police badge in his car, along with 2 licenses with different names. He had cocaine. He had the equipment for smoking dope and everything else in his car. And he left the friggin' door open from his last rental vehicle because he was so high, he didn't even get his drugs out.
Now, I've put Thomas on mute because I want to ask some questions, okay? Look, it's not just Hunter Biden. It's all of these people. It's Hillary and Bill Clinton. And look at what Chelsea Clinton gets and what the money she's making with all this corruption. It's Mitt Romney's niece, Rona Romney, running the GOP, but making sure all the campaign donations go to these rhinos and rats. And you've already mentioned some of the others, Heinz Kerry's son. It's like they're trying to create their own fiefdoms.
With Kerry, their equivalent to our Secretary of State said that he paid Kerry. He even mentioned the amounts, and he mentioned who, and he said it was a quid pro quo so that 1,500 Iranian spies would be given expedited visas to get into our country. And we've already kicked out hundreds of them because they were caught spying. Oh, whoa. But John Kerry's there moralizing and speaking as if he has a higher morale than Trump. It just disgusts me. Hunter Biden is just like George Baby Bush, George W. Bush. He was in special education through junior high school. He got kicked out of the Air National Guard for the 3rd offense of cocaine. He never flew a plane in his life, and yet they tell you he was a fighter plane. He could barely read the prompter. And at the end of every single speech he ever gave, look at his face. He'd get that smile saying, "You see, Dad, I can read the prompter." And his dad was like, "Wow, how come he's a 2-termer? Well, it's okay, because as soon as I was president," his Daddy Bush, "as soon as I got out 1 year later, I went from being a millionaire to a billionaire because I joined Carlyle Group, and I made sure that they got no-bid contracts the entire time."
Liz Cheney is a representative out of Wyoming. She got that position. The boxes were probably rigged because, Mitt Romney and George Soros have this Optech software where they actually, the election boxes are rigged. I mean, so you can have all the voter ID in the world that you want. They're still fractionalizing the votes and rigging the votes behind the scenes. Rona Romney knows her family does this. It's a family business. And yet she has said nothing, has reported nothing. And the last elections in 2018, when we saw people win that we thought, no, there's no way that they could win. They did. And I'd say that she's fully aware that these boxes are still being rigged. So the children of the people that were a few generations back are just as corrupt as their parents and their uncles and their family are.
Dick Cheney was put in charge of the committee to find a vice president. He came back and said he was the only candidate he found. At that time, he had 5 grand jury indictments against him because he was working for Halliburton, and he had sold them equipment while they were being sanctioned. But he became our vice president, and he controlled Baby Bush. He controlled 911. Remember, he was at the controls of 911 in all ways, both, official and unofficial. And I'm not going to go there. But anyway, when we come back to Ukraine, we've already pointed out that there's huge issues. Remember, the sanctions on the Ukrainian pipeline caused Putin to get a private deal with Angela Merkel to bring Nord Stream 1 solely into Germany with a secret deal that Trump revealed when he first went as president to Europe and busted them for NATO and got untold amounts of money in back NATO charges and so on and so forth. Now, NATO only exists because of the Atlantic Council. Who is the Atlantic Council? Well, George Soros puts up money for the Atlantic Council and every other evil group. And what do? They propagandize to say, Russia, 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 Russia. Russia's the enemy. So what do we find out now? When you say CrowdStrike, you say, Dmitry Alperovitch. And when you say Dmitry Alperovitch, you say Alexandra Chalupa, who's on. Dmitry Alperovitch is the IT guy for the Atlantic Council. They called him in early on with the DNC so that they could do the fake leaving of the Russian footprints, because they couldn't let that server go because it had George Soros's economic contact on it. That's the reason Seth Rich was killed, because he was changed from the political primary, just the get the vote out part of the DNC server, over to the money side. And then what did he do? He gave a breach from the one side because he found out when he got away from it that the primaries had been rigged, and that it hit the news. And then it started hitting the news that Hillary was corrupting all the money. And that's another reason, don't give the Republican National Committee, because Rona was going to take that money and make sure that it went her way, not Trump's way. So what they did in the DNC made sure all that money went to Hillary. And so Seth Rich had first given out one jump drive. And then when he was the next day going to give the second jump drive to the FBI, he was killed. So when Trump said the server, it would be just as good to say the name Seth Rich, because he is the one who gave that information out. There was no Russian hacking. That is a lie. There was a double breach. And we know that one was Seth because he told his parents that. And his parents came out and said it to the whole world. And then when the Republican opposition research guy appeared at their house and started paying for everything, they changed their story. But at first, they clearly said that Seth that night had the jump drive and that he had gone out to get drunk, because the next day he was going to the FBI. And we know that he stayed at the bar until really, really late. And on the way walking home, we know that an FBI car supposedly had been broken into just a few blocks away. And the very guns that shot Seth Rich were the guns that were stolen from that car just by chance. Oh, isn't that something? Oh, we also know that the film that was taken of it, that was witnessed by his parents, who said that 3 gang-like looking members were standing over him and that they didn't take anything, it was a hit, all that was ignored. Will John Durham, will Bill Barr take the first step to get any evidence? We don't know. But
and the thing is, we out here know it. We know what has happened, and we're going to hold these people accountable. So Bill Barr, Durham, you better speak the truth, people, because we know the truth out here. We're not beholden to their mainstream media propaganda anymore. Patriots have turned off the television. They don't subscribe to this trash. Now, the nice thing is if you go to that sleazy thing called Drudge, which is nothing but a propaganda hangout for all your mainstream media, when you link onto the headline, it usually goes to a publisher where you can't get through it because they have a paywall. So you see, they've actually shot themselves in the foot, because how can they be influential if you can't get beyond their paywall? That you can't have it both ways. But people are tired of listening to their lies. So our recommendation is always turn it off. That means Fox News too. I know you might have your favorites, but even your favorites, Lou Dobbs and Janine Pereiro and all of them, they're never going to take you to full truth disclosure, because the network is not going to allow them to do it. So enjoy what you can of what they will talk about, but know that they'll never go all the way. Now, Thomas, before you go on too far, and before we have to cut off, I know you're going to say something. I do want to go back to Joseph McGuire, because this is a new character on the scene, and I want to know what we should be watching. So go for it.
Joseph McGuire was set up by Trump. Remember what Trump did when he became the president. He goes, I don't need your stupid Intelligence Committee information. I got better intelligence. And then he tricked them one day without telling any of his staff. He was the only person who knew. He called 3 of them into his Oval Office, talked to them, released them, and within 20 minutes it made the press. So he knew that one of them was guilty. Well, he's been doing that all along. And this new one was his test of Joseph McGuire. Joe, you failed the test. Because Joe worked with Michael Atkinson to change the document. Well, anyone would know that if you check a box, I heard this from others, that up until this moment, that means it's not a whistleblower. That's just called, I heard it on the grapevine, perhaps, complete nonsense. Anybody knows hearsay is not admissible in any case, anywhere in America, ever? Do you know that even your Gmail messages are not admissible in court? I mean, this is absurd to think that the president's being spied on, then they lie, and then they give it out. Now, that could have only been done with coordination by the people who were supposed to be right now doing an investigation on leaks. Both Inspector Generals, Michael Atkinson, Michael Horowitz, are supposed to be spending a whole lot of time with untold amounts of money and untold amounts of people to get those darn leakers. Oh, but then the leak over this one is 100%? So that we don't get to hear the conversation, which, by the way, had to go through the process of having redactions and being declassified and so on and so forth. So if you think for a moment that Trump just now declassified that, you're stupid. Here's what happened, as I started to say earlier. He knew he had the conversation, and he threw in the remark, CrowdStrike, server, corruption in Ukraine. Well, these three things are part of a current counterintelligence actions against him. So as duly elected president, it was his job to ask about those. It was his job to find out about what happened in 2016, especially if the Russian meddling was Ukrainian meddling, which some big part of it really was. We know that because of Paul Manafort and Alexander Chalupa, and we know because of Estonia supposedly calling Ukraine supposedly calling American State Department. All lies. There was no call. That's what we're going to find out. There was never a call. Victoria Nuland made that up, and she made that up to get John Brennan something to get going on. Because if there was a call, it would have been recorded, and they would have given it to John Brennan, and then he'd have justification for a crossfire hurricane, but he doesn't. And we know this because Devin Nunes has seen the unredacted top secret materials and said so. So what's going to happen? Some people may go to jail. Yes. Will Ukraine get Trump? No. It was a setup on Trump's part. He has been, remember when he then called after three of his Intelligence Committee members, Chris Wray, Dan Coates, and somebody else, went before Congress and they testified, and everything they said was a lie. And it didn't agree with Trump and didn't agree with reality. He called them into the Oval Office within, I think, 48 hours. And basically the news headline said he took them back to school. Yes, he did. And he told them to go jump in the lake. That's when Dan Coates actually truly got fired. And that's when he thought he could trust Joseph McGuire. So Joseph McGuire came in out of Denver, and Admiral McGuire he thought was trustworthy because he had been telling him all along he knew there was a counterintelligence operation against him and that Trump needed a counterintelligence operation, and that's what's been going on ever since, and that's what Ukraine is. Do you think Trump didn't know when they changed the whistleblower form? Do you think Trump didn't know that Michael Atkinson had already been in the very place that the Trump dossier started? Do you think he wasn't told that when he appointed him to the Inspector General of the intelligence community, the very community that he was testing and finding to be lacking, and they all got Fs, and they were all liars and cheaters, or at least most of them? Do you think for a minute he trusted Joe McGuire? He just found out who Joe McGuire is, and Joe McGuire just got ran over by senior executive service members because that's what Michael Atkinson is. That's what Michael Horowitz is. That's what many of them are. But anyway, he got ran over them because he rolled over and said, I did it by the book. That's what you always say when you know that you had exculpatory evidence. That's what you always say if you're a Washington, D.C. insider, when you know that you were rolled over by the SES and that it's not your fault. You did it by the book. Yeah, but you didn't ask any of the questions I've just asked or give any of the answers that everyone should know because it was public knowledge. So can we trust Joe McGuire? I did up until now. No, I don't. Can we trust Michael Atkinson? Oh, you can trust him to cover the trail of all the guilty people. And that's exactly what he just did. And Ukraine was a test, and they failed the test because Trump knew exactly what was on it. He knew what was on that conversation, and he a long time ago gave permission for it to be made completely public. And if you don't think that the redactions from the FISA court and everything else are all ready to go, you're incorrect. He's waiting for the political moment. So when this moment arose, his test for the intelligence community was perfect. It could not have been better. But why? Schweizer's book is what, a year and a half, 2 years old? Everybody knows this.
Yes.
How did you not know about Hunter Biden's corruption in Ukraine and China? So what was Trump doing?
They didn't know. They just thought Hillary was going to win and cover it all up. And now they think they can impeach Trump and somehow or another put that old woman back in the play again. Thomas, we want to wrap up now because folks don't like to stay longer than an hour. At least that's what they tell me. I would like to know, I saw a tweet by George Papadopoulos that Bill Barr is in Italy. What do you think's going on there?
He's got, the lie that they fired those six top intelligence agents in Italy had to do with some corruption. Notice they never told you what the corruption was for. I looked into the corruption. It wasn't corruption. That was a lie. Those people were fired because they participated in the Trump coup and in meddling in the election. He went over to gather more information. Let's remember that the very first, that's not true. One of the major meetings of George Papadopoulos was with who Haspel set him up with. She was the head of the London CIA office, and he was told to go to Italy to meet with one of her representatives. He was told by Arvinder Sambhai, who is the British controller of our FBI, both Robert Mueller when he was the FBI and Comey. That's who's been controlling it all. So if you really want to know what happened, you better talk to Alison Saunders and Arvinder Sambhai. They're both British. One Crown prosecutor, the other the FBI coordinator. They were in on this from the absolute beginning. So when we're talking about what's going to happen, you don't need to be worried. People are terrified. Here's what's going to happen. Of course, the House is going to vote for his impeachment. So what? Of course, it's going to get through Nadler, Cummings, and Schiff's committee. So what? They're having private depositions so they can say that things were said that weren't said. And so the Republicans can't even respond. It doesn't matter because they're just going to call for the question. And when they do, they're going to pass exactly as Kevin McCarthy, who, by the way, we said Kevin McCarthy sometimes is on our side. Sometimes he is not. When he called for that question, the only person who could call for the question, they tabled his call for the question. Everybody thinks that was an impeachment vote. It was not an impeachment vote, and it was not a vote to start an inquiry. A vote isn't even necessary, but they acted like it was. That was a Pelosi trick. Pelosi's a wicked, trickful person. She is working directly with the demons. You can see it by just looking at her, okay? Anybody who doesn't think that there's demons inside of her just didn't look closely, say a prayer, go back and look again. We knew this from the beginning because she could only lie. Almost every single word she says is a lie. So all you have to do is listen to what she says, look to the other direction, and you might not have known it, but there's the truth. And so we thank Trump for setting them up with the Ukrainian setup because it brought out Atkinson. It brought out the other people on Mueller's special counsel group. It again brought out Andrew Weissman. It again brought out Bruce Orr. It brought out all the guilty characters again. So if they want to do an investigation, good. Because the truth will not set the Democrats free. If it gets through the House, and it's a good possibility it will, nothing happens there. That's just political. It goes to the Senate. Then it has to be tried by Justice Roberts as the Chief Justice of the United States of America, and not the Supreme Court. And unfortunately, he controls the whole dadgum thing, but the vote comes down to the senators. They're not going to vote for impeachment. It ain't going to happen. So what is this? Everyone who was on the fence in those 16 districts is going to use, if they get impeachment passed, they're going to lose. Not only that, they're going to win the House back. Here's what I predict. I will take a nickel and I'll lay it on the line, the whole nickel, and say that if they pass impeachment in the House, 100% the Republicans will rule the House at the next election.
Oh, very good. Well, folks, it was nice having you drop in. We liked looking at the chat over here. We'll load this up on our main channel. Thomas, as we look at the week ahead, I know the weeks are usually filled with surprises that we didn't anticipate. Do you see anything out there that we need to be paying attention to?
Oh, yeah. Michael Horowitz's FISA report. But remember, it's exactly what I told you. He must immediately recommend prosecution if crimes are found. He has recommended no prosecutions. It is a wash. He is not a white hat. Sorry, even some of the great minds of our time thought he was a white hat. No, no, no. And Bill Priestep, no, no, no. And Atkinson, no, 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 no. Michael Horowitz, no, 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 no. Those are not good people.
All SES.
They're all SES. So what's going to happen? The FISA report's going to come out. And what is it going to say? Oh, yes. Bad things were said in the application. But there was no hearing. Therefore, throw it all away. I told you there was no hearing. Before even that came out, I told you it was national security letters. Nobody's talking about once I've heard one person who was a fake news person talk about national security letters. That's what drove the entire coup. And Comey signed all of those. So the IG report from Michael Horowitz is going to be just like all the rest of it. It's going to insinuate things. It's going to even say people committed crimes, and then it's not going to recommend prosecution. And it's basically going to get them off, and they're going to have a sensitivity training and don't throw another coup.
Yeah, don't throw another coup. And everybody go back and play nice. Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to stay here until they're all arrested. Hope it'll come before our second retirement. Okay, thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see you next time. In the meantime, say good night, Thomas.
Good night, Thomas.